Live.
Welcome to Mount Shasta. For those of you who aren't actually in Mount Shasta, you don't know what you're missing. You should come. For those of you who are in Mount Shasta and are here, welcome. For those of you in Mount Shasta and are not here, we wish you were here. Good tea. Who made that good tea?
You did.
I did. Right? So, we're talking about finding yourself, right? That's what this whole thing has been about. In quest of self, and how to know thyself, and how to conduct this Toltec process of consciousness upgrading. And to assist you on that, we've been looking at maps of your consciousness using the best one we have, the best one we know of, which is the Kabbalistic Tree of Life. We've done a little bit of comparison to other trees of life, and we may get a few little glimpses of that today. But after 3 months of exploring the trees of life in their varying detail, it's time to move on. So today is it. This is the last episode in the series In Quest of Self. All the previous episodes are available on our YouTube channel, which they're captured in a, what do you call that thing? A playlist. We have a playlist called In Quest of Self, and you can watch them. It makes it easy to find them all. So, this is it. This is El Finito. El Terminado. The end. And so we'll take as much time as we need tonight. I hope none of you have to get up early and go work tomorrow. So, in quest of self, the trees of life, consciousness maps. A couple of you actually took me up on my invitation to send me questions. And so these are from Maria. Is Maria online? If she's not, I'll wait and see if she can.
Yeah, she's there.
Hi Maria, I got your questions here. You sent 3 questions, and yes, no, and maybe. Does that work? But the first one isn't a yes-no question. Oh, come on, you knew I was going to joke a little. How do shamans remote view? Same way everybody else does. Can we incorporate the military's technique of a drawing/paper method? Yeah, but why would you want to limit yourself to that? You can do it that way. That's a technique the beginners use, and you can do so much better using shamanic tools you already have. Where on the Tree of Life, here's the Tree of Life part of the question, where on the Tree of Life does the consciousness go to remote view? I'm going to put that question out here because well, maybe not you haven't studied with this long enough, but you two darn well better know. Where are we at when we remote view? Which plane are we on?
The astral.
Ding ding! Yes. Where is that on the Tree of Life?
It's the first triad. I mean,
Okay.
well, from the bottom.
No, it's coming up from the bottom.
Yesod?
Which sphere? Yesod, yes. So, got it, Maria? The Yesod. It's in the astral plane. How can shamans go back through time? See, she numbered these 1, 2, and 3, but this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 questions in question 1. So she cheated.
In question 1.
In question 1, 7 questions. How can shamans go back through time to remote view? Can shamans also go forward in time to remote view? So the answer to those 2 questions is?
Yes.
Yes.
Level 4, use your
Right.
luminous egg to
Right.
go.
So Maria, this past January, the most recent January, what seems like 10 years ago now, instead of 10 months ago, You came out here for our level 4 intensive, during which you were taught this technique.
He's waggling at you.
I'm waggling at you. If so, meaning can we go forward or back, can the outcome end up different than what they initially saw? The whole point of being able to go forward in time, using that technique and exploring timeline options, is to determine the best outcome. So, yes, it can be. Would you have to keep doing it due to things happening? Oh, wait, I missed something. What they initially saw. Would you have to keep doing it due to things happening like everybody else's free will and changing decisions? Yeah, a little bit. That's why you should be using these techniques that we taught at the level 4 regularly. You need to go explore your timelines. You need to see what influences are happening. Go forward in time, weeks, months, years, and look at it. Okay, I missed a question that I remember reading. Oh, it's question 3, never mind. Okay, so yeah, keep going and looking. You're not the only conscious entity in the universe who's affecting your universe. So yeah, keep watching. Now, on to question 2. Okay? And if you still have questions about those, Maria, type them in and I'll see if I can clarify or confuse you. I'm pretty sure I can confuse everybody here. Number 2, what is time? Time is a construct which is a byproduct of a 3-dimensional reality of the space-time continuum.
No, sorry, there's a bug around my.
Oh, I thought you were
No.
raising your hand like you
Sorry.
had a profound comment to share with the rest of the world.
Ah, pick me.
So, linear time is a creation of this reality so that we don't go crazy seeing all possible timelines and all instances of this timeline taking place simultaneously. It's a byproduct because our little brains in these physical biological machines couldn't handle that.
Would that make it related then to the assemblage point and the tonal?
Yeah, the assemblage point is how we control what gets into the tonal and how it gets into and how we perceive time. So the assemblage point is key to pretty much everything you asked in question number 1.
You might want to explain assemblage point.
Did we go over the assemblage point last week?
Yeah, she's had
Yeah.
I can have a little recap, please.
Okay, the assemblage point. A little recap. Let's do a little recap. I don't know. Where is my recap? I can't find my recap.
He's a comic tonight, isn't he?
I'm actually a comic every night. It's just some of you haven't quite clicked in
Next
the right
we'll,
frequency of humor.
we'll get an amulet for that.
I don't need one. I've got these 2. This is all I need in terms of amulets right here. The assemblage point is a structure. It's located in our energy fields. That is the nodal point between the background chaos of the universe and this reality, this holographic projection of what we have agreed to call reality. So it's a filter that lets in only a selected portion of what the real reality is, and it helps to lens, it focuses here holographically, interacting with the holographic generators in our nervous system. Our brain generates laser light and creates a holographic memory system and projection system. Did I talk about Michael Talbot's book? There's a book by a man named Michael Talbot called The Holographic Universe, and it's old, it's probably 20 years old now, and it very systematically walks through all the evidence to document the reality that our brain operates on a holographic matrix And that, in fact, is where our long-term memory is stored, is in this hologram, which is interacting with the rest of the hologram. It's just like a Star Trek holodeck. They got their idea from reality, if you call this reality. So the assemblage point, if we tweak it a little, we change our reality. And we tweak it a little bit, we change it a little bit. We tweak it a lot, we end up on another planet. And if you don't know which planet you're going to, you might end up on one that doesn't have any air you can breathe, and that would be a bad thing for your biological machine. For you, it'd be like, oh, crumb, that's like rebooting the video game.
So would
for
you
your
say that
essence.
somebody that is maybe had a psychological thing that has happened, not just in like physical brain injury, but you know, something that changed their perception, that they actually accidentally had their assemblage point
Yeah.
adjust,
Like
tweaked,
trauma.
yeah.
I think there's a lot of people in mental hospitals who all they need is a shamanic treatment to get their assemblage point back where it belongs, and they'll be perfectly fine. I mean, we already know that 2/3 of patients in mental hospitals have all mental illnesses disappear just by giving them proper nutrition. The rest of it is energetic. You give them the right energy. Now that said, there's going to be a percentage of them where their circuits are fried out. They can't be fixed. And we just take care of them until their machine passes. But a lot of it, you can hear them.
Mm-hmm.
Especially if you're like in cities, because they're more common in cities, but even here in our little village of Mount Shasta City, that's the actual name of our little village, is Mount Shasta City. Somebody had delusions of grandeur back in the day. And even here, we get enough interesting travelers coming through that you'll see some of these crazy people, crazy in quotes, talking on the streets to no one, unless you put on the dreamer's stare and you listen to what they're saying, and they're talking to entities. They're seeing through the veil. They're trying to warn people, oh my gosh, there's these entities, right? Yeah, there are. Then you just think, yeah, they're here all the time. They'll leave you alone. Don't worry about it. Look at you. You see them. Yeah, of course. And then they got a new friend, right? And then you get in your car and drive away, and they're like, oh, my reality just changed. Right? But that's really what they need. They need shamanically to have somebody tweak their assemblage point back to this timeline. That without their permission, you know, then you're interfering with their free will, maybe. It's complicated, but that's what's going on. So the assemblage point is a lot of that. And so we perceive time, because if we had to see it all at once, the limits of these biological machines right now are such it would blow our circuits. So it's a byproduct of this. Are there recurring cycle? Oh, can we do any exercises to someday manipulate time? Yeah, someday you could do exercises to someday manipulate time. Or you could do the exercises to manipulate time right now. But it's your choice. You could do it someday. But I can't teach that on tonight's class. Are there recurring cycles in time? Absolutely. There's from day to day, year to year, aeon to aeon. You know, there's the 26,000 year cycle as we go around. We come through the same energies again. We just started a new 26,000 year cycle. You know, somebody at one point drew a line and said, this is the start of the cycles. And we just crossed that at about roughly 2012. So we're into a new, and that 26,000 year cycle is divided into 2,000 year cycles. And every time humanity fails, it's like we have to reboot the whole human race, and we go back and it's like, okay, you blew up a continent, so back to caveman days you go and try again, right? That's kind of what happened.
It's a cat.
That's the cat eating, yeah. We keep saying, oh, we should lock them in the bedroom so this doesn't happen while we're online, and we're like, eh. Okay, so that was question 2, was about time. Number 3, is fate / predestination real? Yes and no. I'll explain in a minute. Let's say you get an awful tarot reading as an example. Could you change the outcome simply by willing it to be otherwise? First off, if you get an awful tarot reading, find a new tarot reader. You should only deal with good tarot readings. So if by awful you mean one you don't like, then that's simply trying to get your attention. You have a true will, a free will. You have a true will, a true purpose for being here, and you have free will to choose to follow that or ignore it. And you make those decisions every day. You have an innate nature. You know, we talk about the archetypes on the tree of life, but we come in with our own archetype based on our astrology and our DNA and our familial lineage. So like me, the Scottish Viking barbarian, somebody else might be an Italian Roman, poor soul, and so on, right? So then we have our soul lineage. You know, I was a Viking warrior, I was a Celtic warrior, I was a Japanese warrior, I was a Tibetan monk, I was a this, I was a that, and we have all that we bring to the table. That's our stuff, that's our material, and then for this incarnation, the astrology says, here's how we're going to package it. We're going to stick your hot Mars in a water sign just to make sure you don't take off too many heads before you turn 40, right? That was the rule I had for myself this time around. Now that I'm past age 40,
All bets are off.
all bets are off. But I'll only do it if they need it. That's the other part of the equation. So you have all that material, and you're coming in, and if the tarot reading isn't something you like, generally that means that you're off track. You're supposed to be doing your will, and as long as you're doing your will, the tarot readings are going to be neutral or positive. There's a lot of things that might come up in a tarot reading that have no bearing on your will. It depends on what kind of question did you ask, how you worded it, how good the tarot reader is. Tarot is both a science and an art. And anybody who sees my art compared to Leonardo da Vinci's art or Michelangelo's art know that in terms of art, my art ain't as good as theirs. Right? So the same with tarot. I'm an okay tarot reader. Probably better than I give myself credit for. But there's some others where it's just, they're fluent. For me, I probably always have a foreign accent when I do tarot, you know, to use an analogy. But I speak it and I understand balance that I bring to the table. So find a good tarot reader. And the best advice I can give you is, now that we're finishing up this inquest of self-evaluation of the Tree of Life, and we included some tarot in it, is become your own tarot reader. Develop one. I'm going to be walking through a little bit of a meditation. I'm not going to do the meditation, I'm just going to give you the instructions tonight. And develop your own relationship with all the archetypes. And all the 78 tarot cards, they all represent an archetype. So get to know them and have conversations with them using this technique I'm going to show you. And when you do that, hopefully your bad tarot readings will stop, assuming you apply yourself and you learn the material. So,
Can I make one comment about that?
yes.
No, you cannot just simply will another outcome. You know, to do that would be to negate why you even got the tarot reading and what, you know, if these cards are destined for your question and you don't like the answer, just simply willing it to be otherwise.
That's a good point.
You know, you need to work on the material. You need to figure out, well, you know, even if it was the reversed aspect of the card, let's say you got the death card and you're freaked out about death or something. It's like, well, really understand what that means. It's not about a physical death necessarily. It could be the death of a relationship, or a part of your past is over. There's a lot of different ways of looking at that, and if you don't take the time to just investigate it and just simply will it to be otherwise, then why are you getting the reading?
Right. That's a good one. You said it probably better than I would have said it. So you don't want to just will it away. You want to work it away.
That's it, I like that.
Yeah.
T-shirt, work it away.
Oh, write that down and give it to me after the class. The whole concept of working it away and using that information, it really is the key. Because it means you're not on track. It means there's a weak link. And for those of you who aren't here physically, I've been working on finishing my woodshed. We're in the final stages of winter prep here at Glen Haven. And I'm up working on top of this woodshed that's probably 10 or 12 feet high, and I'm balancing on the very tip top of a ladder. And if I don't have that foundation exactly right and exactly level, then a half inch off here, you go up a 10-foot ladder, you're several inches off, and then you go splat.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? You get in a hurry when you're young and foolish, and you learn the hard way when you end up hanging by one hand from a rafter because your thing went down, and you're like, okay, how do I get myself out of this one, Mr. Wizard, right? So you figure out how to climb down and get in a position where you can kind of jump or grab or whatever. So, that was 30 years ago. That was my approach to setting up ladders. Now my approach to setting up ladders is very different. I get out my shovels and I level, and I put, if it's crooked, I get boards out and I block it up on 2x6 chunks, and then I have a stable foundation, and then I climb the ladder, and then I can work at the heights. And that's what I was doing over the weekend when I wasn't doing something else. So that's what we do when we climb the Tree of Life, is you have to have that stable foundation. So the bad tarot readings, or let me rephrase that, the good tarot readings that point out a weakness, it's crucial for your self-defense and your preservation when you start working in the higher planes. If you can't do that, and you won't have the discipline to get your foundation in order, you will go splat. And at the higher plane work, when you go splat, you might fry circuits and you may be done for this lifetime. You maybe no longer have the option to do higher level work. So it's really crucial that you learn the discipline, you do it right. And like the example of the death card, that we walk through some of it, but not even all the true meanings of that. It doesn't mean, oh, you're gonna die. Yeah, I guarantee you, you will die. So every time you get the death card, if you just say, I'm gonna die someday, yeah, but it doesn't mean that, right?
Transmutation.
It's one of those three paths into, let's go over here for a second, right?
There he goes.
The death card, right? The path of noon, right? This is the fish. This is one of the three paths leading into Tiferet, the Christ consciousness. It's the death of the ego. It's the death of the lower worldly Malkuthian aspirations and replacing them with alignment with your true will and divine aspirations. It's also a mirror image of this path over here between Hod and Tiferet, which is
Devil.
the devil. And we talked about all that symbolism, the shadow self and so forth, the raw, potent, big, bad, scary symbolism of the raw male sexual force. Well, what's this then? The symbolism, the raw, unadulterated female sexual force, right? Death can represent the female orgasm, the total submission to the raw male sexual force and creating a union. Okay, so this is part of that personal internal alchemy we all have to do. So if you get the death card, you better know more than just, oh, I'm going to die someday. Because, yeah, you are going to die someday, and you want to be ready to cross that abyss. You want to prepare yourself for that day. And then, of course, temperance is learning to work the alchemy in those narrow bounds. Not too much of this, not too much of this, or else the yogurt explodes all over the ceiling, right? So alchemy requires that discipline. You have to merge these three paths in that intertwining of the caduceus pathway, okay, which we haven't talked about much. We may get to a little bit tonight. It's one of the more advanced aspects, but there's something else we get to tonight later. So, if you look at willing it to change as making the change part of your true will and taking control of it and owning it and not making excuses for it, then yes, you will it to a different outcome. You work it. Now make sure you got that quote down earlier. Whatever I said, it was brilliant, I'm sure.
It was brilliant.
Okay.
Do you want to know who's online?
Yeah, let's go through the whole list of who's online tonight, please.
Who's on first?
Yes.
All right, Maria Bellotti, William Rowling,
Hi, William.
Viento di Octubre,
Viento de Octubre. We missed you last week.
Mohadib,
Wadib.
Dennis Brown,
Dennis, welcome.
and George G.
George, awesome. Awesome.
Oh, and Angela 22 is here.
Angela 22, you were here a few weeks ago and we've missed you since then. Welcome back. We love it.
So she asked a question,
Okay.
what if free will doesn't exist?
What if free will doesn't exist? Then every prophet who's ever lived on the face of the earth is wrong. And we're all having a really good time pretending that it does. And that has been one of the age-old philosophical questions. Is it pure fate or is it pure free will? And I look at fate and free will as potentialities. It's just like the Heisenberg uncertainty principle combined with the Schrodinger wave equations.
Of course.
Well, it's obvious, right? Okay, there's probabilities, okay? Electrons are a probability wave. That's what the Schrodinger wave equations tell us. And Heisenberg says the act of observing it or even thinking about it alters it. So that alters the probabilities. This is very shamanic. Modern physics is very shamanic. Science is starting to catch up with shamanism. They got a ways to go, but they're getting there. So we got to cheer them on. And every little baby step forward that science makes that's correct, good on you, right? But that's what it is. So if fate does not exist and it's all free will, or vice versa, there is no free will and it's all fate, then it would be a really boring video game for the creator to be playing. And if you have the power to create a universe, why would you bother if you knew the outcome of every movement of every player? That's kind of a philosophical thought question that I throw out in response to the pure fate crowd. So I don't believe a creator would do that because I certainly wouldn't do that. It's sort of like when you stack you're playing solitaire, right? And you're tired of losing, so you stack the deck. So yep, I won. And you stack the deck up, yep, I won again, right? It's like, There's got to be some probabilities in there to even make it interesting enough to play. And so the creator created this universe for probably far more reasons than I know. And it's not done yet. And we're being trained, at least this is the viewpoint of the Toltec lineage, we are being trained to become co-creators. We are being trained to become gods. And the Toltec path is not the only spiritual path to think that. This is training ground. This is University Earth. Conditions on this planet are different than most other planets, precisely to put us into this cauldron of alchemical transformation so that we can do that. There's a whole universe out there that hasn't even been designed, let alone finished. So, Angela, I am not in the crowd that believes it's pure fate and there is no free will. The fate / destiny or your dharma is before you incarnated what you agreed to try to do down here, with no guarantees that you'll succeed. But it's the process of pushing forward that creates that heat and friction that transforms us, both individually and collectively as a species. So the answer to your question about free will, what if there is no free will, is really only answerable, in my opinion, if you take this eternal perspective across lifetimes. And then it's like, okay, I'm going down here, I'm trying to get as much transformation and growth of my essence as I can in each incarnation. And so we're given an opportunity. You know, but are you going to write the D paper or are you going to write the A paper? Right? My advice, go for the A paper. If you fall a little short and you get a B or C, that's okay. At least you did well, but if you barely didn't flunk, it's like you just wasted an incarnation. And my other t-shirt says, an incarnation is a terrible thing to waste. So don't do that. Don't waste it.
So part of the question is, what if? So we don't know. Until you're dead, you really don't know what if. But if you proceed in this lifetime as if you have free will, you will probably discover that magical things start falling into place when you determine what your will is and you do it.
Right. The other thing I can tell you is, if you do your work on a higher vertical path up the tree of life, you will make contact with the intelligences beyond the veil, and then you know. It's not a guess. So, any other questions?
Well, she just asked a clarifying question. Do you think synchronicity is a form of us exercising our free will to an extent?
Yes. I think our higher states of consciousness, our essence, our holy guardian angel, our daemon are working with a lot of the unseen hosts that we don't know is there, and because these physical eyes don't see them, to create the conditions that are the right opportunity. And they are a sign that you are projecting a desire to accomplish your true will. You can create synchronicities to pull you away from it, but the consequences are usually bad.
So the true will assistance.
Right. True will assistance, whatever you want to call it. I call it the holy guardian angel, is the primary mover for creating synchronicities. So, anyway, thank you all for being online. Welcome back, Viento and Angela. So now we're moving on to a question from Silviana. Hi, Silviana. Hi, Holden Eagle.
You know I know.
You had a typo in my golden.
So,
I understand that activating all DNA strands is essential for our human equipment to be optimized. I have that understanding too, and I understand that part of the long-term evolution of humanity is moving from 2-stranded DNA into 12-stranded DNA. The next step, of course, is 3-stranded DNA. So here's my question. How do the 3 pillars of the Tree of Life relate to the topic of DNA activation, especially in relation to the 3 levels represented by the 3 triads? Okay, let's talk about that. Let's go over here for just a moment. DNA is part of our physical machine. It's down here in Malkuth. The DNA, of course, is in part an antenna to receive information. And like any antenna, the size of the antenna, the diameter of the spirals, the length of the spirals, you know, how tightly you stretch that slinky. Do you guys have slinkies in Europe? The children's toys, the big long loose
Like a
spring that
spring.
walks downstairs by itself.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so how tight you stretch it, all the physical parameters, you can come back over here, of the DNA spiral or the antenna spiral will determine what frequency it receives. And then the machinery after the antenna determines the processing. So this is all part of the evolution of humanity. We're trying to evolve the physical human form to have more DNA, to have a more complex nervous system, to be able to interface with our like bodies. And so we're pushing evolution that way. And the reason we're doing that is we are simultaneously trying to evolve our own individual essence. So we're working a top-down, bottoms-up, simultaneously approach to be able to create a physical vehicle that will enable the physical vehicle to host the fullness of what is potential that a godlike being could host, or the functions. Right now we're limited. So what we want to do is we want to do that. So in terms of the tree of life, the way we proceed to activate our DNA is we make ourselves better receptacles and better receivers. So we clean ourselves out physically and energetically. We detoxify, we do all the physical things down here that we should. We eat good food, we have good nutrition, we exercise, we learn energy techniques,
Chakra alignment.
chakra alignment, chakra cleansing. We activate and become aware of our attention body, all our other light bodies, and by doing so, we receive more information from up here. So it's not like you can point to one place on the tree of life and say, oh, that's the DNA place. But the caduceus, the serpent path, is a three strand energy current. And that energy current is part of the key energy that's designed to enter the antenna of the DNA. And so we have the chakra system and then a meridian system, and it transmutes that energy down to where our cells can interpret that. So the DNA, the energy moving through the body is both energy and power, like the wall sockets to turn on the lights, but it also carries information and instructions to the body. And so we get to a point when we get our consciousness at least up here where we've mastered this ethical triad, and then the body is able to start receiving higher level instructions. I know people who grew, after the age of 65, grew 3 inches because they had gotten themselves to a point where they were ready and they started evolving physically in this lifetime. So physical evolution inside one lifetime is possible. And part of that is going to be those kind of individuals have activated a higher portion of their DNA. So it's all intertwined, and it's a very good question. And it's complicated, and that's about as short of an answer that I can give, and I hope it's intelligible.
Can you just trace with your pointer what's happening with the caduceus?
Okay.
And so I guess my idea here in answer to her question is, if the caduceus flows of energy are mimicking a DNA strand, which they do,
Yeah,
then really what we're talking about is the three pillars and weaving that energy between the chakras which run up the center pillar.
right.
So just
So
simply
there's-
clearing the chakras. So it's really kind of a whole, it's the kundalini.
Part of the whole story. Keep in mind that you can overlay the tree of life on our physical body, and up here is Kether, and down here is Malkuth, and you spread them out in between. Then the same thing happens at the level of a cell. And the same thing happens out there in the cosmos. Does that start to answer your question? Okay. I know it's not complete, but I don't know that humanity is ready for a complete answer.
Where's the assemblage point on the tree of life?
It's not. A lot of things aren't on the tree of life. We're going to talk about some of them later.
So wouldn't it be above, in other words, it would be an entrance into the tonal, and if this whole tree is the tonal, it would have to be above that. So those Ein Sofs and Ein Sofstars and all those, it would be above that, or that is the assemblage point.
Somewhere on that membrane
Right.
then is the assemblage point. So,
Viento says we don't want complete answers.
okay, I'm good at withholding information. Okay, what else are we supposed to talk about tonight? Oh, so to wrap up the Tree of Life, I alluded last week to any questions before, other questions before we go on about material I've covered so far tonight or previously, because I'm about to go into the next major subject.
I think that this is what you're going to talk about, but it just seems like there's a lot of different ways that one could apply
Mhm.
the Tree of Life as a tool to doing their work.
Yeah, that's where I'm going.
So
I have one more
think,
method.
The flows on the tree are the other thing that I'm interested in, how things flow.
Okay, so when you start studying this material, you will find, as every student does, that there's no one source that has all the information. So you're going to need multiple sources. You're going to need to apply yourself, and some assembly is required. You have to do the work. Last week I mentioned that one good way is get in a dark room, set up a tarot card right in front of you so it's easy for you to look at, be in a good meditative posture, and the only light in the room is illuminating that card. You can do that with a spotlight, with a couple candles on each side, however you want to do it. But that's really all you should be able to focus on. Hang a black cloth, have the card leaning up against it, and then a candle on each side, a little bit in front of that, and so you're not seeing anything else except that card. And do that. Do a meditation on each card. Give yourself time, do one a day. That's only 78 days. That's less than 3 months to you and me. So that was the first suggestion I had. And it's especially effective if you're a tarot reader. And or you want to become one. And or you think you're already one. You can get better. So I like this meditation, and I think it's important to use the right tarot deck. Number one, there's whatever tarot decks you resonate with the caveat that some of the common ones have a lot of old fear-based imagery in them. So try to avoid the fear-based imagery if you can. Get a tarot deck that lets it all hang out. For this purpose, I mostly like the Thoth deck that Crowley developed. His is the opposite end of the spectrum of fear-based. And I like the images, and I think if I were going to do this, which I have, that's the one I recommend you use until I finish writing mine, which is a little ways away. So don't hold your breath waiting for it.
My experience has been that, well, the old symbology is arcane and we don't all remember it or understand it, even though some of it's universal. A lot of the newer decks are really just, playing to your ego. It's like,
Yeah.
oh, I want a fairy deck, or I want a mermaid deck, or I want a,
Yeah.
warrior deck, or whatever. I think it's important to do a little research on it and really see what effort went in, not just to the artwork, to come up with some pretty artwork, but, the actual knowledge of the person
Right.
putting the symbolism in there.
You have to have the good symbolism. It's pure and simple.
And with all that said, there was one deck that I would recommend for people who want to do more like inner child work, or, kind of figuring out some of their stuff, is a deck called the Inner Child deck. Because it uses fairy tales that we all grew up with.
Oh, okay.
And so, like, for example, the death card is Sleeping Beauty. So it gives you some other symbolism then to be looking at with some of these cards that, can be triggers and things like that.
Oh, the fairy tales. It would be great for somebody to do a fairy tale series and look at things like the death card in Sleeping Beauty and what wakes her up. It's the kiss, which of course is symbolic of a more involved act, shall we say. So, which is part of what the death card is embodying. So, yeah, that would be a good deck. So, anyway, that was what I talked about last week. What I want to talk about this week is Jungian psychology. Jungian psychology is based on the archetypes that are captured in the Tree of Life. Carl Jung, long history there. Several of the students, like, what's his bucket? The mythology
Joseph
guy.
Campbell?
Yeah, Joseph Campbell. Got two of his books on the bookshelf in the windowsill behind me. You'd think I'd remember Joseph Campbell's name. So there's a whole world there. And this book that I have here, I found this years ago, many, many years ago. It's called The Inner Guide Meditation by a man named Edwin Steinbrecher. And it got a foreword by Israel Regardie, who of course was Crowley's secretary for many years. This is what my version of the book looks like. Is that visible on screen?
Yep.
Okay, Inner Guide Meditation. So there's a meditation technique in here, and I'm going to try to give you the highlights. And if it becomes too confusing, then just go read it in here. I used this years ago. It's very powerful, and I highly recommend it. It's based on the work, basically they were practicing with Jungian psychology, trying to use the archetypes as helping people understand their psyche, which is what the Tree of Life is all about. And people started having and reporting, like in dreams or in meditations, stumbling into characters that when they described them, they matched the archetypes. And they would describe these encounters as being very real. And so they developed a technique of how to navigate this inner landscape safely. Because even the author had a couple of scary moments, and as a result, we have within us an inner guide. Sometimes it's called the inner teacher. And we connect with it, we learn from this inner part of ourself that's tapped into those higher planes of consciousness. And the technique in here is based on several thousands of encounters with different patients, and it's been refined. And then once they got the technique refined, they used it on several thousand more, and it works, is the bottom line. And it always works the same way. Whether you're male, female, doesn't matter. It's based on tapping into the archetypes, which of course is tapping into the core structure of the universe. And the laws of physics are such that it has to work. So I'm gonna just walk through this quickly. Don't worry about taking notes because you won't be able to keep up. Just go back and watch the tape, okay? Or better yet, I recommend this book. Not required if you're a student, but it's recommended. Okay, so the purpose of this meditation is to make contact with your inner guide, not just as a hypothetical or theoretical construct, but as an individual. You will get to know your guide as an individual and know them by name and be able to carry on and have conversations with you. To the extent that you have the discipline to learn meditation technique and to visualize, and especially to access the astral plane, this technique will be more effective than if you can't do any of those skills. So if you can't sit still in meditation for more than 30 seconds, and or you've never been able to follow through successfully with an astral exercise, this is not your technique. Don't do it. You can mess yourself up. You need to have discipline, and you need to have at least the beginning of the skills of using the astral plane. So that's my caveat. He words it differently, but there you go. You've been warned. So you're going to assume a meditative posture, and then you're going to go into your astral space and you're going to invent a cave. You could be just outside the cave, you could be just inside the entrance, and it can look like anything you want the cave to look like, what comes to you. Okay? You have an intent of contacting your inner guide. You're going to go through a cave in the manner I'm about to describe, and so your higher consciousness will create the cave that you need to see. Your motion as you move into this cave is going to be always to go forward, and then left, and then right. And I'll give you details in a few seconds. As you move through this cave, you need to do so from the perspective of being inside your body and looking out your eyes. You do not want to be out of body and watching your body move through the cave. That's key. He goes through a lengthy explanation about the experience they had, that some people just weren't getting results, and then one or two happened to mention, oh yeah, it's like I'm watching myself on a movie screen. And then he got them back into their bodies and it worked. So that's key. Be in your body, moving through this vision. So it'd be like lucid dreaming and not sitting back passively watching the dream. So you're in the cave, you've created a cave, you're staying in your body, you move forward through the cave. Note the details. It could be a dirty, dark, smelly, musty cave full of bats and cobwebs, kind of like the tunnel in the Lord of the Rings movies with
Pluto's
the
cave.
spiders. Or it could be a nice, smooth, polished old hardwood floor inside a cave. Where you create it. It's your cave. It could be anything, but pay attention to the details so that when you finish the meditation, you can write them down. You keep moving forward through the cave, and then if it's like a narrow tunnel, just keep going down the tunnel, following its bends, and you're looking for an entrance on your left, like a side door or a side passageway. And if it's just you opened up into this big, huge, monstrous cavern, then just keep moving along the left wall until you find the side entrance and go through it. You've gone left. Now you might be in another long tunnel, or it might be instantly opening out, and when you get to the end of the tunnel or it opens out immediately, you're going to be in a whole new landscape. When you get to this new landscape, ask to see the animal who will guide you to your inner guide. It should not be an animal that you know, like it couldn't be one of our cats, because they're still alive. It shouldn't be a pet that you had earlier in life. So the dog I got when I was in kindergarten, it wouldn't be him. but you find your animal. It could be any kind of animal, but it should not be a mythological creature. No unicorns. Sorry, Serenity, if you're watching. It has to be a real, quote unquote, animal as defined by this reality now. So no dinosaurs. I mean, yeah, we know they used to exist, but they don't anymore. So it needs to be a real animal. And then when it comes to you, tell it to take you to your inner guide to the right. So now that you're in the landscape, you're going to keep moving to the right. Through trees, waterfalls, open, barren rock, whatever it is, you're creating it. And you're looking for your inner guide. As you're moving through this landscape, if you get lost, stop, call the animal back and say, okay, now keep going. You may encounter a lot of other people or other beings, and that's okay. But ask, are you my guide? And you may meet false guides. They can say, oh yeah, I'm your guide, your guide. And I'm about to go through some questions to ask them to make sure. But the first thing you need to do is make sure it's nobody who's either A, still alive, or B, was alive during your current lifetime. Okay? So the first time I did this, the first person I encountered was an actor, a famous movie actor who I've seen and I knew from movies. I never met the individual, but I always admired them as an actor. They either make you love them or hate them, right? Depending on what role they play. When he played Oliver Cromwell, I hated him. When he played somebody else, I loved him. It was, what's his bucket? Richard York, who played Oliver Cromwell in that big movie. Yeah, it's him. He's right there. I'm like talking to him. And it's like, nope, sorry, Richard, you're not my guy. And but we could talk, nope, I'm not looking for you. So I just kept going, right? And then I met my guy. So you keep doing that until you get to the person, and there will probably be an instant recognition and an instant resonance. For me, when I saw my inner guide, it was like meeting an old friend, because I'd had a series of meditations with this person many, many years before I did this exercise. And they functioned as a guide. Then, and I see, it's like, oh, it's you, of course, duh, right? That was how I felt. And there will be some kind of joyous recognition, even if you don't remember having met them yet. And so when you meet them, you ask them their name. Most false guides won't tell you a name, or they'll make one up and you'll know that you'll just look at, oh, you're lying. And then ask them, are you my inner guide? Because the rules are, because remember, you're talking to an aspect of yourself, they have to give you an answer, these archetypes. They can't lie when you ask the direct question. And then the next thing you do is, in this inner world, this inner landscape, you ask your inner guide to point to where the sun is, because you may not see it directly. The true inner guide would say, oh, it's right there. False guides will usually have an excuse for why you don't want to do that right now. Don't buy that. No, if you can't play it, then you're not my guide. Tell them, keep going, this isn't the right one, and then they'll keep taking it. Then, when they say, oh yeah, the sun's right up there. Ask the sun to come down. Now the sun is one of the archetypes, right? Right over there, between Yesod and Nitzah. No, Yesod and Hod, sorry, that's the star. When the sun comes down, when you work with any of the archetypes, there's two things you're going to always ask each one. Question one is, what do you, the archetype, need from me for us to work together successfully and for us to be friends? And they may tell you, stop being a witch. Stop being an a-hole. Oh, okay. Pay attention, whatever they say, remember it. And then you ask them, what do you have to give me, as a symbolic object, that I need from you? So once you go through this and you've met your guide, and you have these questions, you return the same way. Right? You go back out through the side door and then back out the cave. When you get to the entrance of the cave, you end the meditation. Always say thank you to the beings that helped you. And the next time you come back, you go in, you meet your inner guide. Now, so one thing about your inner guide, one more thing that's very important. Your first inner guide you meet will always be male. Female shows up and says, oh, I'm your inner guide. No, you're not, because you're not my first one. It has to do with the alignment of the 9th house, astrologically being ruled by Jupiter. And that's the house where the physical appearance is ruled. And so that's why the first guide you meet will always be male. Yeah.
It seems like if you were making a map of your psyche, that these turns to the left and then the right are also taking us back and forth between hemispheres of the brain, which is also related to right and left brain, or masculine, feminine traits. And so, so in other words, if we were coming down the tree, let's say you were up at the top at Kether, the first turn you would make is to the left, which is taking you down to Hokwa, which is masculine.
Right.
And then the next turn you're making is right, which is taking you over to Binah, which is feminine.
Yeah. Now, after a while, your first guide may say, okay, we're done. Time to you to meet your next guide. From that point on, your guides can be either female or male. Doesn't have to be either. My second guide was male, and I'm still working with my second guide. Probably not often enough, but it was male. So your second guide might be female. It will never be anyone other than your first guide who tells you it's time to move on to a second or a third and so forth. So in that case, your first guide introduces you to the second guide, your second guide will introduce you to any third guide, and so on. It won't be any other creature or any other being. Anybody walks up, hey, I'm your third guide! And you say, really? Gee, that's funny, I'm only on my first. Get out of here. Right? Whatever it is. Question?
It seems like this, if somebody hasn't done a lot of work with guides and doesn't feel like they have a good connection or command of who they're talking to, and basically commanding, the space, that this would be a really good exercise for that, just simply to get in the habit of asking questions and following a certain set of directions. And I guess part of me, wants to reject it simply because there's too many rules, and on the other hand, I can see it as this is a specific game that we're playing with our psyche, and we're setting what the rules are and expecting our psyche to follow those rules.
Yeah.
In which case, it seems like that in that case, like for example, if I was to walk in a room and the first animal that came along is a dragon, it's like, well, that's the first thing that came along. And now you're saying, well, it can't be a dragon. So it
Right.
seems like we're learning to control the consciousness at a different level.
It's a higher level of discipline and control. Remember I was talking about the path of temperance. There's these narrow bounds. The path of judgment is discernment, really. how to judge accurately and get that feedback. So yeah, this is a higher level of working. So on the one hand, this is a higher level meditation, which is why I say if you can't hold your attention, you can't be disciplined, you can't know if you're in the astral, then this isn't a good tool. But on the other hand, for someone who has started having those abilities, it's about as safe as you can get to do this work. And then once you make contact with your inner guide, always work with your inner guide. Always listen to your inner guide's advice. If he says, go down this path, don't go down that path, listen. It's like, hello, what the heck are you going to the trouble to meeting your inner guide for if you're then going to ignore their advice? It'd be like going to an esoteric school and having a teacher that, oh, I want a teacher, bring me a real teacher. Here you go. And then you get instruction, you scream and run away and do something completely opposite. It's like, why bother? Right? So follow the advice of your inner guide. Do the discipline to make contact the right way. Then you know you're with the real inner guide, and follow their advice. And it's power. And the power comes from, this is tied to the archetypes, it's tied to the world of Jungian psychology, and thousands of people have been run through this system as it got refined. And it works. I've personally done it, and I recommend it. So if I hadn't done it, I wouldn't be recommending it. I've been doing it for years.
So there's two comments
Okay.
regarding this, and then Viento has a question when you're ready for random questions again. Mohadib says that she's used this technique a lot and loves how no matter how long she sets a timer for when to do the meditation, that her guide sends her back right before the alarm goes off.
Beautiful. I love it.
And then Viento was confirming that, yeah, you want to associate with that inner image, not, watching the image, but
Yeah.
to be in it. And he says, I'm so lucky and grateful that he found his way here tonight. I first learned of this form from Drew Crystal about 20 years ago, and have since lost my notes and the techniques Drew into
wow.
the shadow until now. And he called it the Cave of the Ancients.
Yeah, I think that may be one of the terms that's applied in the book. In this book, there's a lot of images they've reproduced that are, it's just a tarot card. Like, here's one I'll hold up. It's this ancient lithographic style. This is from a close-up of what's called the Rime of the Ancient Mariner. So I think that could be the Cave of the Ancients. Anyway, Viento, this is the book, The Inner Guide Meditation by Steinbrecher. And I picked this up at a used bookstore probably 20 years ago. And it took me a while before I got into it, but yeah, it works. It's powerful. So anyway, any other questions on this?
Not on this, so when you're ready for his other question.
Well, let's ask his other question, because then I have the next major field I'm going into.
So it looks like he's comparing a question about the lesser banishment ritual to, is it Takyoko Shodan?
Taichoku Shodan.
Okay. So he's saying, when doing the lesser banishment ritual of the pentagram, one stands between the tower and art. Where can one stand when doing the Takyoko Shodan? And he's saying Pei and Shemek on the tree for the lesser banishment ritual?
Yeah, he's talking, let's go to the thing.
Okay.
He's talking about right here,
Right.
that crossing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, this is the path of Pei, or the tower. This is the path of Samek, which Crowley calls art, meaning the art of alchemy, and the older language calls judgment. meaning you have to have accurate, no, I'm sorry, temperance, that bounds, judgment is this one down here. So he's talking about here, and that is the place of where you should have your consciousness for the banishment ritual. And it's also, Viento, the place where your consciousness should be for reading Tarot, as opposed to Hode, which is, I think, was your answer a couple weeks ago. It's here, right there, the same place you're doing the banishment from. For Taikyoku Shodan, you really is here. You're starting out here in Malkuth, and you're training your reflexes, and it's part of training to do that hind brain that EJ talks about, that front brain and hind brain swap to make the forebrain the moving centrum and the back brain the mental centrum. Now that's real shorthand, but do your kata from get into that space, which gets you up here into Yasad, and that's really where we're working from. Does that answer his question? I think it
I
probably
think so.
will. Okay. Raise your hands if, see, she was the smart one.
Right.
You want to volunteer to be made fun of. Oh,
Right.
see, I do too. No, raise your hands if you know what the Qliphoth is. I know you've heard of it.
Flippin'?
Qlippoth. Okay.
I raised my hand.
You raised your hand. I know you've heard of it, and I know you know some of what it's about. So the Qliphoth is also known as the shadow tree.
Oh.
It's also sometimes called the tree of death, as opposed to the tree of life. The picture I sent today with the announcement on the email and on the Facebook
That was a
page,
beautiful picture.
that picture is one I found doing a Google search image search on Qliphoth. And that was one of the images I found I like. And it has some interesting aspects, it has some hideous aspects, because the Qliphoth is also known as the realm of demons. And shamanically, it's part of the dark side. It's part of the underworld. The Qliphoth can be the underworld, say, for more obvious in the Norse tree and the Celtic tree, where they very overtly deal with the underworld. The Kabbalic tree does not. It's not overt at all, it's hidden. So there's a lot of misinformation about the Qliphoth. What exactly is this shadow tree, and how does it work? And there's a lot of extremely fear-based information about it. You will find things written like, regarding the Qliphoth, don't talk about it, don't do anything with it, don't even think about it, don't just la 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 la, we don't do that. And it is potentially dangerous. You have to know what you're doing to use the Qliphoth. And the higher up the tree you go, the higher powered you get, esoterically, magically, shamanically, the more attention you attract from the dark side, you will attract those who want to pull you down. So probably well, let me back up before I go there. When you start to research it, I would say 2/3 of my dozen or so or more books on Kabbalah and the Tree of Life, at least 2/3 of them don't even talk about it. No reference whatsoever. So my beginning book that I recommend, the Practical Kabbalah Guidebook, they don't even mention it. Not in there whatsoever. A lot of the other ones aren't. The only book that really deals with it, in theory, is the Dion Fortune book, which, yeah, I brought it. it's here.
And it's almost like not an afterthought, but it's just kind of like she teaches you everything you need to know, and then she's like, okay, you have to know about this stuff. And, it's just
But
like.
don't do anything. It's still fear-based, and rightfully so. This is the big, bad, scary part of the universe that most people run away from. This is the kind of, you'll get the kind of response like I got when I was taking an announcement over to that one health food store at the time. The guy wouldn't let me in the store, right?
Mhm.
If you haven't heard the story, call me and I'll tell you. But it was as fear-based a response as you could get, and the guy ran away screaming. And subsequently, his store closed. He didn't make it. You can't be fear-based and not allow the public into your store. So anyway, the Cliffith. One of the things that Dion Fortune describes about it is, it's like the reverse of a coin. So everything you know about these Sephiroth, it's like you're looking at the heads side of a coin, the obverse, as numismatists would call it, and the reverse, or the tails side, is the Clippith. So where all of the Sephiroth in the Tree of Life have an energy that based on the archetypes, which is based on the fundamental structure of the universe, and each of those archetypal energies we call either a god or a goddess, depending on whose pantheon you're using. They could be Egyptian, it could be Greek, it could be Norse, and you might call it Jupiter or Zeus or Odin, but it's the same energy, right? Same one. The flip side is there's energies that rather than calling them gods or goddesses, we call them demons. And the only agreement I've found in my research on the Cliffith is that all the sources, which means they all probably copied the same original source, they all agree on which demons are assigned to the 10 Cliffith, the 10 spheres and the shadow tree. What's interesting is there's no agreement on how the Cliffith formed, what is it, and how many spheres are involved. So I'm going to give you 2 or 3 of the stories about where it came from. Most of the Kabbalic literature, the rabbinical Kabbalic literature, dates from the most advanced assessment of the Kabbalah from a rabbi in, I think, the 1500s named Isaac Luria. You'll see reference to the Lurianic writings. That's him. And he wrote a version for the Clippith, which basically came out of the question of why the Jews got expelled from Spain in 1492. So after 1,500 years of being kicked around the world because Christianity was upset at the Jews for executing Christ, because even the Christians didn't understand that Christ came in voluntarily to do that and only that, and therefore why get mad at the Jews for them helping him fulfill the prophecy, which makes no sense, right? You try to talk to Christians about this and it's like they don't get it. Why be mad at the Jews? They did what they were supposed to do. But anyway, that was the thing. So they finally found a home. They settled in Spain. Everything was good. They were all happy. And then 1492, Columbus sailed out of Spain to go across the Atlantic. But in the meantime, Spanish royalty said, yeah, and we're done with you Jewish folks. Out you go. You've all heard the bumper sticker, shit happens, right? Have you seen the religious versions of those? There's a different version of shit happens for every religion. So, like for Buddhism, it's, what is the sound of shit happening? The Seventh-day Adventist one is, shit happens a day earlier than you thought, because they have their Sabbath on Saturday. And for Jews, it was, why does shit keep happening to us? Right? So Luria was trying to figure out, why does shit keep happening to us? And so where did evil come from? And so they came up with this story that Evil wasn't a creation of man, it was therefore created by God. They pushed it up the tree of life, up the ladder, and said, oh, God did it. And the story is, now, there's threads in common with other stories from other sources about this, which says that during the formation or the creation of the universe, something went wrong. There was a problem, something unexpected happened. And one of the stories says, look, can we go back over to this other camera now? One of the stories says, okay, we're doing along fine, we created Kether, we created Hokmuk, we created Binah, but then when the energy got to Hesed, all the subsequent Sephiroth broke and shattered and had to be rebuilt. The stories describe the vessels that hold the energy as like a big giant clay jar, because that's what they had back then, was clay jars. And that even though they shattered, that on the lining of the clay jar there was residue of the light or the energy or the oil, it was described as, that was just enough energy in it that it gave those shards life. And somehow those shards of life became the demons because they were upset that their universe had been shattered, right? And then God had to build new receptacles to hold the energy, and then everything, creation worked. So that's theory number one. Theory number two, which is the one that Luria prescribed to, is it was only Geburah. Cat, no.
No, kitty.
She's,
Come on.
yeah, I don't want her messing up my cables. For those who didn't see that online, we've got cables running for the lights and the sound and the cameras, and then we cover them up with mats so we don't trip on them and break computers. Not that that ever happened. And so the cat likes to come along and wrestle with them, and I could just see everything crashing down. If we go offline, it's the cat's fault. So, back to Luria. His theory was, it was only Sephira number 5, Geburah, that had the problem that shattered. So its name is severity or strength, and it shattered, and that's where all the evil came from, was just that one. But the others worked, and then God had to build a new number 5. So as you go through everybody else's writings on the Qliphoth, you'll find that some sources will say, there are 10 spheres in the Qliphoth, as the shadow tree behind. Others say, no, it's only these lower 7 that are there. And then other sources will say, no, it's only the middle 5. So the supernal triad is intact, Yesod and Malkuth are okay. It's just these middle 5 that have a shadow aspect to them. There is no universal agreement. Yet they all have, most sources talk about the 10 names for the demons associated with the reverse of the Sephiroth, which are the Qliphoth. Now, the Western alchemical traditions, Western magical traditions, have another explanation, which is the Qliphoth are the representations of unbalanced force. You'll see the term, the lords of unbalanced force. And every time, let's go back over here, we go from one Sephiroth and create the new one. That process, because of like a burst of energy, as one fills up and triggers the next one, that process as a natural byproduct releases this Qliphoth. And so it's not so much something went wrong as it is a natural product, which would be very Newtonian.
Like
right,
a
in terms of-
domino effect, right?
Not so much a domino effect.
Backfiring or exhaust? Or
Kind of like a backfiring or an exhaust. One of the things I read that described it as the excrement. But it's sort of like Newton's laws. For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction.
Right, that makes sense.
We're down into the world of polarity. So once we get past Binah, there's duality. And you have this shadow tree. And that's where a lot of the evil forces hang out, because nobody's looking for him there. And people don't summon the demons anymore. And one of the sources I read said, oh yeah, that's why they're starting to manifest on their own. They're tired of waiting for people to summon them, so they're coming on their own, right? So I don't go too far down that road. But the Qliphoth then that you may encounter in your meditations, in your work, are energies and forces that are of a negative energy, and they will be evil, you know, if you want to take that on. And they will try to interfere with your progress. And they can be big, bad, and scary, and they can be dangerous. So you need to be forewarned and forearmed, and to work shamanically, you have to be willing to go there. You have to be willing to look at the ugly picture. You have to be willing to have an intellectual conversation about Satan or the dark side and say, what is it the dark side's doing this week? How are they controlling the politicians who are puppets, right? The Qliphoth is almost certainly involved in all of that world.
So we're not summoning our own demon in the shadow side ourselves, are we?
You might, yeah, we keep in mind,
I mean, the whole Qliphoth is that this,
that's part of you.
yeah,
And it's part of the universe.
Right.
It's the macrocosm and the microcosm. Just like, yeah, you have Jupiter energy in you, and there is a force out there of Jupiter. There's a force out there, you can call it Odin. There's a different force energy that could be considered Thor. Okay? I only mention that because I have a longer experience with the Norse tree and the Norse pantheon than I do the Hebrew or the Egyptian. And I've had personal encounters with the Thor energy. So, if you're going to be doing this work, you need to beware that there is this thing called Qliphoth. I highly recommend you read the section in Fortune, because it's one of the few places where there's a whole chapter on the Qliphoth. Now she has it's mostly cautionary, and she does tie it into a lot of other aspects of the tree. It's worth reading. It's hard to find anything else accurate. I found half a dozen or so PDFs that I downloaded, and I read through them to prepare for this. And there's bit piece here, there's a bit of piece here, a bit of piece there. I don't have the whole explanation. I think it's a cross between something unexpected happened during creation, and there's a natural side effect of creation that creates this due to simple polarity. But then I do think something went on unexpected. Yes.
So have you read whether there's any direct connection to especially the 10 demons that are named as part of that shadow tree, as related at all to the Nephilim or the fallen angels?
I didn't compare the name lists.
Okay.
That would be a worthwhile activity.
Okay. And then, have you studied much of the Lyrica tree? Because his tree is totally different. It has
Yeah.
all sorts of different aspects to it, and I wondered if his
I
tree
have a note
showed at
on
all anything to do with the Qliphoth.
Yeah, hang
yeah.
on. So the word Qliphoth means shell or husk,
Oh, okay.
which kind of implies that it's just a side effect
Right.
of natural growth. Viewed by some as the realm of demons. Don't go there, don't talk about it, don't even think about it, are the types of warnings you will find.
does Joseph Campbell talk about it?
Not to my knowledge.
Well,
I haven't read every bit of Campbell's
Yeah,
work, but
and I think, I think it's pretty clear that you could look at it as the shadow aspect. So, like if all the tarot cards can be laid out on the tree of life, most of the tarot cards will have a flip side aspect. Not all readers read it that way, but some decks will
You
show.
mean the upside down?
Yeah, so if it's
Yeah.
upside down, it has this other
Right, right,
meaning.
right.
So simply in that way, like he mentioned Jupiter, okay, well, if you think of all the positive or aspects of Jupiter, but there's gonna be a shadow aspect of Jupiter as well. So, that's why.
Very quickly, I personally don't buy into the tarot card being the reverse. Right side up, it's always good. Right side down, it's always bad. Or upside down is bad. You have to interpret the reading. Is first off, there's a range of meanings for every card. There's good, bad, in between, and then there's definitions that are neither good nor bad. So you have to look at every card in relationship to what was your question, what is your intent, what kind of spread you're doing. Is it a 3-card spread, a 10-card spread? Where is it in the spread? You can't just blindly say, oh, it's right side up, it's a good thing, or bad side down. Yeah.
That said, the Toth book comes with double meanings, and I've found sometimes like when the meaning doesn't seem to apply at all to my life, you know, and you know, with critically looking at it, it just like, no, this doesn't seem to fit me at all. Often that reverse is more generic. You know, it's just saying, well, this may not be applying to you, but it might be applying to your society or your people around you, or you know.
So, yeah, Crowley looks at it kind of both ways, but I would say he more describes a range. A lot of the authors usually do that, and I think it's too simple. I think it's, yeah. Okay.
So one thing Viento said about that is the reverse can mean just a lessening of the energy.
Yeah.
And then also Maria said that they as in these dark whatevers, sound like the archons.
Maybe, yeah. Okay, so here's some other notes that I didn't get into my big notebook yet. The Qliphoth are defined, or some consider to be demonic entities that survived from a former universe into this one. That might be the shell of the world shattered and had to be rebuilt, and so they survived. It could be something else entirely. The Lords of Unbalanced Power. Isaac Luria says the orderly creation process was interrupted by disaster.
Isn't it fun when you can't read?
Well, especially my own writing.
Yeah.
It's this little notebook. I was trying to cram too much in here. I'm looking for that one thing about writing of Luria. Writing considered to be the bear with me. I'm almost out of notes. I get you. There was something I read, and apparently I didn't get written down in my cryptic notes, about the way Luria looked at the tree and the purpose of creation, and it's odd, and I was going to read it and I don't remember it all. So
I mean, it just looks completely different. He has circles instead of lines and stuff. But it seems like what he's trying to do is kind of combine the 4-world thing into like branches of the tree that have a lot of different shoots and kind of things. But
the that which is an interesting way of showing it. There's a certain amount of skepticism I have for some of the things he said, because they are so different than everybody else who's ever meditated on this and gotten answers. That said, he was obviously wise, he was obviously connected, and he was bringing things through. And just because he's the only one who brought it through doesn't mean he's wrong. That said, a lot of his interpretation of the Cliffith was based on the shit happens for the Jews. Why does shit keep happening to us? Why did we get thrown out of Spain in 1492? Well, he would really be upset about the Holocaust in the 1930s and 40s Germany. So it's sort of like any of the ultra-Christian overlays in Tarot and on the tree, the Kabbalah with a C. This so far predates Christianity, and quite frankly the universe predates Judaism. They just have the best description of the tree, which is why we all use it. That I kind of take some of his Cliffith with a grain of salt. I think some of the Western alchemical approaches tend to be less fear-based, despite cautions about if you're going to go there, you got to know what you're doing. And I totally replicate that. If you're going to do this, you got to know what you're doing. But you got, in order to, like, for example, in order to banish a demon, you have to be able to summon a demon. And so you can protect a space, but if you want to be specific, you've got to be able to control demons, which means you've got to take your consciousness up the tree and be working from higher than Malkuth. You got to be up in Tiferet or higher, and then you command with the force of God. Mm-hmm. And then the demons have to obey. Any lesser beings, the elementals have to obey. And so you have to be able to do that from the standpoint of no fear. When you're coming face to face with a big scary demon, mm-hmm. whether it looks like the devil card or it looks like your ex-wife, it doesn't matter. You have to stand there calmly in no fear and command it to do what you require it to do. If you can't do that, if you can't foresee yourself gaining that ability as you gain your shamanic skills, then this is not the path, and you definitely don't want to go down the Cliffith road. So we're wrapping things up tonight on the 3-month-long exploration of the Tree of Life. And I would be remiss if I didn't caution you to say, get your act together before you do this. But be aware it's there, and if you start to see things or sense things you don't understand, that's the time to contact your teacher. Mm-hmm. Don't run away screaming and try to figure it out yourself and assume the world is out to get you and it's all your teacher's fault because you didn't follow the rules. Not that that ever happens.
Well, it seems like if the tree is simply a map of the universe, mm-hmm. and we should be able to all acknowledge that there's both positive and negative mm-hmm. energies out there in the universe.
I agree.
There has to be a way of mapping and understanding where those mm-hmm. fall. And, you know, where you're at and what's above you and what's below you. And again, because this is work on shamanism, you know, we're not all, you know, blissing out looking for white light experiences. We're here to be able to go up and down the tree, and if we're called to go into a shadow aspect, we're gonna run into shadow entities, and you have to know how to deal with
them. It's just a map of our shadow side.
I mean, you could just move into a new apartment and have issues with, you know, elementals.
Right.
And if you don't know where an elemental falls on the Tree of Life, then you probably shouldn't be dealing with elementals.
Well, in that case, you need to get somebody involved who knows how to command elementals. I've 3 or 4 times now been called to exorcise homes. People move in, there's entities, they start seeing poltergeist activity. So you go in with no fear and you talk to the entity and you say, here's what's about to happen.
You have a choice.
Yeah, you have a choice. I'm going to open a portal. You can go back to the light, to God, and go where you're really supposed to go. Or you're going to be banished out there into that chaos stuff that you know what it's like and you know you don't like it there, where you will get eaten. So, that's your choice. And you will never be allowed back in here.
Yeah, you want A or you want B?
Yeah, It's door number 1 or door number 2. And when I've done this work, every single time they've taken the light. Yeah, let's sign me up for that one. They can't get through the door fast enough. So,
I have a question, if
Yes.
we go back to the tree
okay?
and follow the line of creation.
Okay.
So in several of your, in your research about when this happened, it said at the, something went wrong at the point of creation, and that seems like, boy, God screwed up at the very beginning, really? And so if we're going with the creation, we're going, through that first triad
So we
first.
go here,
right?
here, and then we jump down.
Now, wait a minute, before we do that, so if in fact this is related to the Nephilim or the fallen angels, they were part of the act of creation as entities, but they never got to cross the abyss and actually come down into the lower realms. In which case, it would make sense that the error happened once the abyss was crossed,
Mhm.
and that then you have this division. If there was a third that fell, a third that are incarnated, and a third that are watchers, right there it would cause a division
Mhm.
between the entities that were created in the act of creation
Yeah,
for
I
this
think.
realm.
Okay, so the path you're talking about goes from Kether down to Kopah to Bennett, and it jumps down to Hesed,
Right.
Deborah, Tiferet, Nitzah, Yusah, Naku. So it's the lightning bolt path, as it's often called. And there is no agreement in any of the Clifford literature. I couldn't find any two authors who agreed on what happened and when. And I put a, I'm suspicious of Luria's writings on this, but some of the older writings talk about, the shattering of the vessels and the residue that's on the vessel. And again, this is a metaphor, right? Because, the universe isn't sitting inside a big giant clay pot. That's the best they had at the time. And those big clay pots were often used for holding oil, which was used for cooking. You burned it in lamps. It gave light, and so the analogy is that oily residue on these pottery shards animated them. There was enough force in it that they became animate. So,
What about the Popol Vuh? With the creation story, when the first humankind they made was out of mud, and that didn't work
right,
well. And then I forgot each.
right. So there's in a lot of the Hebrew and Christian scriptures, they really barely mention the concept that there have been multiple versions of humanity. A lot of the other esoteric writings acknowledge that, especially some that came from Eastern traditions in India, that there's around the 6th root race and there's going to be 7, or we're transitioning from the 5th to the 6th or the 6th to the 7th. Again, there's no universal agreement. There's a general consensus that there's been at least 5 races, major races of humanity as the human race evolves.
Right.
Okay? So we're at a transition point, which is what the Toltec work is all about, is to help further humanity to add greater capabilities to become more like gods. Right? Teotihuacan, the city where gods are made.
Or forged.
Or forged. I like the forged
Me
myself.
too.
So the Nephilim, there's some say, although they never made it down to cross the abyss, but then they're marrying the daughters of men, and their offspring
And
are being
even
a great renown.
they're asked to replenish the earth, which means they're bringing back something that was
had
lost.
been there before. So there's a lot of disagreement in the scriptures and in the writings, and there's a
How
lot of
intriguing.
there's mysteries that aren't known, and if any one of these aspects intrigues you and piques your interest, then meditate on it, but use your inner guide. Make sure that you're safe while you do that. Don't go diving into the cliffeth without knowing what you're doing.
Right.
That's my admonition. A, you need to know it exists. B, you need to know that it's dangerous and you're swimming with demons. And C, you need to know who you're talking to.
Is it okay to read it and just,
Well,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I read 6 or 8 things about
Yeah.
the Clifford in the last couple weeks.
I mean, it's not like I'm gonna run out and practice it, just read it.
Yeah, I don't,
Not like
you know,
season.
Yeah.
where was that thing that I read earlier that I wrote out of?
You gotta buy him a bigger notebook.
I have
Yeah,
25 bigger
A
notebooks.
barbarian with a little notebook, it
That's
just,
so it
But
fits
it's-
into
Not
his pocket.
It has to fit in my pocket, right?
Oh.
I had this with me, it's like, okay, I'm not walking over to get a big notebook, this is what I had, so,
it's not working for me. Just so you
where
know,
was
the
that go?
Popol
Okay.
Vuh is the Mayan.
I know it.
phrase.
Yeah,
I know it.
yeah.
Yeah,
Read it.
good.
I know many things.
Yeah, I bet you do.
I read many books.
Anyway, it was the don't talk about it, don't do it, don't talk about it, don't even think about it, just don't do it.
They're making it sound like it's Pandora's box or
Yeah.
something.
So of course I'm gonna go open it, right?
Right.
You know, how could you be a shaman and, well, it's not like we seek out danger, but you
It's-
learn the universe by exploring the universe.
It's like when we tell Coyote not to go to Stockton because it's a Bardo port, and so he
Oh,
stops
really?
in Stockton.
So what's he say about that?
Who?
Coyote about it?
I don't know. Ask him.
Okay.
He and I have talked about it. There's different aspects of it. So, you know, I'm trying to give you enough of an overview that you're forewarned and forearmed. And if you want to go read about it, start with Fortune because it's the only thing written, really, one of the few that I could find, other than internet stuff and you about the internet, right? Anybody
Right.
can write anything on the internet, and they do. So, is there any validity to it? Look at their sources. Who were they quoting? One thing I put up some credence in is it was quoting Fortune and 2 or 3 other authors that I at least recognize. Okay, this is probably some legit stuff here. So,
Maria asks, what are the Jinns? The same as the Cliffith?
maybe, maybe not. The Jinn are, some would consider them demons, others would consider them elementals.
Aren't they in the Bhagavad Gita?
I don't know if they're in the Gita. I don't remember them by
You
that
don't
name.
think so?
I don't think so. So they're magical beings. I think they're more in the elemental category. You can work with them. The literature talks about, you know, if you work with them, it's not like they're pure evil. So the story about demons is they're pure evil unless you have more power than them, in which case you control them, which is, you know, a subtle thing. So to do any of that is get your consciousness up the tree of life. Work from a place of power, align and connect with God and your holy guardian angel, and then they respond to you, not the other way around. Don't make deals with demons. If you start dealing, oh, I'll give you this if you do. No deals.
This might be a good place to have the demon daemon discussion, because I don't know that we talked too much about the daemon, holy guardian angel thing yet in your series, but because, you know, I think most people when they hear the word demon, they're thinking, oh, we're dealing with something evil, rather than just something that's in the shadow realm that could be an elemental, that certainly could be a being of light, but it's
Okay, very quickly, the daemon, D-A-E-M-O-N is how it's usually rendered in English, is a Greek word that is used to describe the elemental being that is with you from birth. And you also have a holy guardian angel. And the angel is a higher level entity, the daemon is a lower level entity than you. Both of them know your true will. And the daemon is a lot like a friendly, playful, loyal dog who loves to play fetch, loves to play frisbee, wants to go to the beach, wants to go for walks, and you've got to sit here and read this book your stupid teacher told you to read. It'll be good for you, the teacher says. Trust me.
Then write your report.
Yeah. And then write me a report on it. So you've got to learn to work with your daemon. Now the daemon will lead you astray a lot more easily than your angel. Your angel will not lead you astray.
So give your demon something to do.
Well,
while you're
yeah,
doing the book.
that's a whole other theory. But a daemon is not a demon. Okay? The spelling and the sound of the word are similar, but that's where the similarity is. Demons are evil, and there's, Fortune talks about the two kinds of evil. There's positive evil and negative evil, and they manifest different ways. They're still evil, but there's different kinds of evil. So demons fall into one of those evil categories, and they are not your daemon. So it's just a nomenclature, and it's a higher level of specificity and understanding that is required if you're going to do this work. If you're going to make the most of your incarnation, you settle your Malkuth, you do your horizontal path, you do good, you do acts of service, you maintain the balance of the four elements or the four suits of the tarot. You have to have your mental going on. You have to have your cups, your water, your coins, the discs, and the fire. So earth, air, fire, and water. Those represent aspects of life. They have to be balanced. You have to do like I did when I'm standing on the tip top of this ladder. You have to have it balanced, and it has to be stable. That means working all the lower portions of the tree. Then you go up a tier and you rebalance everything. And then you go up a tier and you rebalance everything. So you have to be working from a position of a secure foundation, and then knowledge and no fear. Fear is the mind killer. Fear is the little death that brings total obliteration. You must face your fear. You must allow it to pass over you and through you. And when it has gone past, you will turn the inner eye to see its path. Where the fear has gone, there will be nothing, and only you will remain. Okay? So no fear, and if you have knee-jerk reactions to the subject in any way, that's a hot button that you can be thankful for, because it's pointing out a weak link in your chain, a chink in your foundation that you need to fix. So, Tree of Life, Roadmap to Consciousness, and this concludes our series in Quest of Self. So there is the playlist. You can go back through them all as many times as you want until the internet comes crashing down, in which case you'll have to come here and look at them on my computer. So we're moving on. We're moving on into something else. This next week I'll be doing a series of meditations to figure out what. If you have suggestions of things you want to learn, send me an email. Say, hey, what about this? What about that? It'll probably have something to do with the work and Toltec something or other. Probably. Or we could talk about fly fishing. Whatever you want to do. Astronomy, the science behind things like astrology and other aspects of the work. There is a science. There's an art, a philosophy, and a science. Mostly we've talked about philosophy. But yeah, now you see hopefully why we had to do the Warrior series before we did this.
Mm-hmm.
You have to warrior up, get your discipline on, get your fear mastered, and then you can start to work the tree. If drawing the devil card sends you into conniptions, You haven't warriored up enough. You're not being your Toltec warrior. You haven't balanced your dreamer, your stalker, and your warrior. So go do that. Any other questions online?
So Mohadib said recapitulation techniques. Some of those were covered in the level 4 too.
Okay.
So we have a couple announcements. I don't think we have anything else this month, but the 2nd of November, we are having an ABD, that's the American Book of the Dead class, to learn about the ABD and how to be a labyrinth reader. If you feel called to do that kind of work, especially as a gatekeeper or hospice worker, caregiver, any of those things, it's really good for that. And then that evening, we're going to have a All Souls Day, because that's the day that it falls on Saturday, is All Souls. A ceremony where we're basically, I'm going to take us through the first 5 chambers of the ABD, and you will have kind of a joint altar where we can put different names on there and take those voyagers through.
So, I have a question about that.
Yes.
Is this the kind of event where people who have relatives or friends or someone who's recently passed can bring and be taken through?
Yes. So it'll be a live ceremony.
So they need to bring like a name and birth date, death date, locations, and a picture? And a picture?
Okay. Yeah.
That's a question.
Well,
You're in charge of
yeah,
that.
they can, but the names are all we really need, for what we're going to be doing. So,
Okay.
But we're going to have kind of a community altar, so if there are other things that you want to come and put on the altar, and either take them or then they'll be released into the wild. Mohadib is teaching a level 2 Akadial class in Red Bluff on November 23rd.
Ah!
And I think we're doing one the weekend before that, but I can't remember the date. So
Yeah, I don't know about that. That would require me to look at the calendar.
right, so we.
I have a personal private secretary for that.
So if anybody that knows people who are a level 1 and let's see, there's time yet if you were to give a level 1 for someone to be ready for a level 2 for Mohadib's class
Right.
at the Gratitude Center.
It's 28 days from level 1 before you're eligible for level 2. So that's more than 28 days away. So if you haven't gotten your level 1 yet, A, why not? And B, see somebody who's level 3 or higher and get it now.
So and
All the cool kids have it.
yeah, ours is on the 16th up here in Mount Shasta. So
All right.
and I think that's kind of
Okay.
it.
I think that's it for now.
Oh, the Reno Comic Con
Oh right.
is.
Are you guys doing that?
Well,
Now,
Gabe and
where
I-
is that Reno Comic Con?
It's in the convention center.
But what city?
Reno.
Oh, it's in Reno.
Yes. Yeah, and that's November.
Okay. It's in November. What year?
This year.
Oh, okay.
Eighth, 9th, and 10th.
Well, the 8th, 9th, and 10th, okay. So, Reno Comic Con, go learn how to animate Toltec stuff.
And yeah.
Okay, I want to thank everyone for your kind attention these past 3 months as we've explored our way up and down the tree. And I hope you find it useful. And I hope you do it, meaning the meditations, and you learn it, and you learn this language, because remember how we started. The Tree of Life is the ultimate Rosetta Stone for all your consciousness work, all your spiritual work, and for accomplishing your true will in life. So, there you go. We are done with the In Quest of Self series right now.
Thank you.
Go offline.